Dear friends, this is day 1082 of the Russian war against the civilized world. American President Trump had a call with the war criminal Putin. DPRK will help Russia build drones. Finally, Russian invaders are losing edge in artillery comparing to Ukraine. Let's talk about all these updates right now. Frontline update. 133 Russian attacks were recorded yesterday. We can see that the Russian activity keeps going down comparing to autumn-winter last year. 5,800 cases of artillery fire were reported as well. Ukrainian defenders shared a footage of striking the headquarters of the Russian 35th Brigade in the occupied town of Selidovo. Russian monitoring channels published an obituary reporting that the commanding staff of the brigade has been wiped out completely. Also, Ukrainian defenders showcased a footage of shooting down Russian Su-25 attack aircraft. The Russian pilot got lucky, though he died. Also, we keep receiving updates from Kursk, where Ukrainian troops seem to have started a new advance, using the opportunity while the DPRK forces were withdrawn to regroup due to their losses. According to President Zelensky, Ukrainian forces advanced 2.5 kilometers deeper into enemy territory, and 28 Russian attempts to recapture their positions were deflected by the Ukrainian defenders over the past 24 hours. Chief of the General Staff of Ukraine, General Starsky, stated that Russia is losing edge as far as artillery shells. He said that only last year the Russian advantage in terms of artillery shells versus Ukraine was estimated as 10-1. Today it's 2-1. And here I think I should clarify something for you, my friends. First of all, Ukrainian troops need 4 times less 155mm shells to hit their targets, comparing to Russians with their 152mm shells. The reason is that 152mm Russian artillery is less precise comparing to the advanced weapon systems used by Ukraine. Even despite all the aid coming to Russia from the DPRK, I think it's highly unlikely that the situation will change for Russians as their artillery stockpile decreases, and this is a good news. Bad news is that the situation could be much more beneficial for Ukraine if the crucial moment wasn't lost earlier last year, when the Ukrainian forces experienced extreme deficit of artillery shells while the military aid was blocked in the United States for extended period of time. This resulted in losing several key settlements and, what's even worse, lives of the motivated Ukrainian soldiers as well as civilians due to this long gap in terms of supplies. As of this moment, the artillery supplies keep flowing to Ukraine in huge quantities, and my guys report that they haven't seen so many shells being delivered for a very long time. But I think if they had those supplies back in 2024, it would change a lot in the areas like Bakhmut, Chasiv Yar, and south of Robotyne. Considering the amount of drones used by the Ukrainian defenders to strike Russian vehicles and disrupt logistics, the Russian invaders developed a new countermeasure. They started installing nets along the critical supply roads on the occupied territories. The footage showed Russian invaders covering about 2 kilometers of the road from Bakhmut to Chasiv Yar with nets, expecting it to protect them from the drones. While it may help the Russian invaders to evade Ukrainian FPVs, it means that the Russian troops will have less chance to escape in case their vehicle is hit inside of such tunnel. Also, it is unlikely that the nets can stop the free-falling munitions anyways. You know, every time the Russians introduce something ingenious, like those barbecue bars on top of their tanks or donkeys to supplant their vehicles, it brings a joy to my life, seriously. Let's see if this works for them too. The US President Trump called Vladimir Putin, wanted by the International Crime Court and also widely known around the world as Huilo. According to the New York Post, Trump stated that he has an effective plan to finally settle the war. He also stated that Putin truly cares about his soldiers on a battlefield. Also, President Trump refused to tell exactly how much time did the whole conversation take. The Russian spokesman Peskov made a typical Russian statement. He said, quote, "Kremlin neither confirms nor denies that this conversation between Putin and Trump took place." I freaking enjoy this so much. I mean, Peskov is like Schrodinger's spokesman. Yes, they may have talked, but at the same time, they may have not. But I think we should understand why exactly Kremlin couldn't clearly answer whether they had a call with Washington or not. According to Kremlin's communication agenda, Putin cannot admit to his population that the rotten West is forcing him to negotiate. Fact is, Putin's only condition to negotiate the peace in Ukraine is de facto complete annexation of Ukraine, turning it basically into a puppet state like Belarus. In this meaning, his goals are clear to his population. They are being constantly retransmitted through his media. They want to see Ukraine stripped of its sovereignty, army, and territorial integrity. Once again, that is Russia's conditions for so-called peace, which in reality is a death wish for Ukraine as a nation. And Russians actually keep pursuing this goal, my friends. They put enormous efforts to slowly keep their pace, sacrificing hundreds of thousands of their personnel for the square miles of Ukrainian territory. In my opinion, Putin is not going to show his population that he wants to negotiate an end of the war against Ukraine on different conditions. Russian propaganda keeps talking about how this war is actually about Russia protecting its existence against the evil West. They keep stuffing the heads of the Russian citizens with ideas of striking European capitals or recapturing Berlin one more time. Then there's multiple indications that Russians keep expanding their forces. According to President Zelensky, Putin is looking to recruit 100,000 more soldiers. Then there's kidnapped Ukrainian minors being indoctrinated and trained in the Russian military camp to grow up as future Russian invaders. All this indicates that Kremlin has a long-range plan of reaching its objectives within years, if not decades. It's also crucial for Putin to win this war within the next 2 years, considering the dynamics of depleting his military stockpiles. That is why negotiating with Trump will be extremely inconvenient for the ruling Russian regime. I think that the only possible reason it may happen is to trade some time to replace losses in vehicles and personnel and hit Ukraine one more time. But by the time Ukraine may already have international peacekeeping forces deployed on its territory or long-range weaponry to deflect future Russian attacks. Marco Rubio, by the way, also mentioned this possibility that in case of a ceasefire, Russia may use this opportunity to regroup. Therefore, in my opinion, it's much more beneficial for Kremlin to keep the war going and hope that the Russian disinformation campaign in the United States and Europe will eventually result in decreasing the international support for Ukraine. Another thing is that majority of the Ukrainian natural resources are located in Donbass, and maybe Trump will receive an offer to trade them with Russia rather than Ukraine, in return for example, lifting sanctions and reducing support for Ukrainian armed forces. I think that Kremlin can totally make such offer, considering that, for example, Elon Musk, who requires those resources for building his vehicles, was spreading Russian disinformation on Twitter already several times. In the meantime, according to the Japanese press, Russia and DPRK will launch production of combat drones in the North Korea. According to the sources, DPRK will receive technologies from the Russian regime that will include different types of drones, and North Korea will start the mass production already this year. It will completely remove the threat of the Ukrainian strikes on the drone-producing facilities and ramp up the Russian strikes on the Ukrainian civilian infrastructure. In return for this, DPRK will keep sending its troops to help Putin fight against Ukraine, And apparently soon we will see more cases of the North Korea harassing its neighbors with long-range drones like Shahed or Garpia. But despite of that, I wish you all a beautiful day, my dear friends. Please share this episode, and traditionally I will see you in the commentaries. I'm Operator Starsky. As always, be safe.